Oh, hello.
Hi.
Welcome to So Perfect.
Hi.
What can I do for you?
Well, okay, so I had this friend who had a friend who came in here, and he said you hooked him up with like this really kickin' suit. He said you were like magic.
Magic, huh?
Yeah.
What else did your friend tell you?
Well, he said you were also like the nicest guy in the world, and you helped him out with a few things.
Well, we do dress shirts too.
I don't think that's what he was talking about.
Maybe a vest?
No. He said you're like a super nice guy, and you helped him out with some like really deep issues, some good stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay. This is a suit shop, not a counseling center.
Okay. Right. I get it. Okay.
All right, so
I'd like to buy a suit.
awesome. Awesome. So what would you like? Would you like a double-breasted suit? Would you like a zoot suit? Tuxedo.
Well, what's the cheapest?
Oh, okay. Well, we can probably fix you up with a nice 3-button standard for about $100.
$100? Yeah, my friend said you were like pretty inexpensive. You had some specials.
Cheap. Okay, well, we can probably help you out.
Okay. How about something like a dark blue? They say that blue's the new black.
Yeah, we don't do blue suits.
What do you mean you don't do blue suits? Well, how about the dark gray with like a really tight pinstripe?
Yeah, we don't do that either.
Black?
Nope.
Okay. Khaki. White.
So you want a white suit? Great. Why don't you stand up here? Let me get my tape, and we'll get started, okay?
All right. So, hey, can I tell you about this fight I had with my wife now?
I guess so.
Okay. So it all started the other night, right? When I got home from this business trip, and she completely lights into me.
Stop. I've heard this one before. It's pride.
What do you mean, stop? This is my story.
Yeah, I know, but I've heard this before, and it's your pride. You think you're better than you are. Stand up straight.
Did you just call me prideful?
No, I just told you to stand up straight.
All right, I get it.
All right, go ahead and put your arms down.
Did you ever think that maybe my wife is prideful? Like, I'm the super humble guy who always puts his wife first and serves her in every way.
Really?
Maybe.
So are you that guy?
Sometimes.
When?
Okay, so last week, right? We had our date night. I called, I made all the dinner reservations.
Nice work.
Right?
Did you dial all 7 numbers yourself?
What is that supposed to mean?
Well, making a reservation isn't necessarily serving someone. Let me ask you, while you guys were on your date, did you tell her everything?
Yeah, I think so.
No, you didn't. As a matter of fact, you really didn't tell her much at all. The truth is, you only dealt with the things that she caught you at, and even then, you defended yourself.
Okay, and how do you know that?
Because if you told her everything, she probably would have forgiven you by now. You'd feel better about yourself, and you wouldn't be in here talking to me, trying to cover up your mess. I think that about does it.
Look, I can't tell my wife. I mean, I did some really bad stuff. Man to man, I was on that business trip, and I just never thought she'd find everything out. I can't tell her. I mean, at the very minimum, we're going to have trust issues from here on out. It could ruin our marriage.
This will take me about a week. I'll text you when I'm finished.
What, that's it?
Oh, well, we can put a full break in the pants if you want.
I'm talking about this fight I just had with my wife.
Yeah. This is a suit shop, not a counseling center. See you next week.
why does confession work? Why does me saying something out loud remove a spiritual stronghold in my life? I believe that it does. I believe this is true, that when I confess my sins or I share with a brother or sister something I'm struggling with, it's like the enemy who's got a grip on me somehow just loses a little bit of his grip simply because I've confessed it, because I've said it out loud. So this got me thinking and the wheels turning, and why do these words matter? Why do these little syllables that we put together into words and sentences and phrases, why does this affect the spiritual world? And after talking to a few people and kind of studying some things, I came up with today's topic. This is what we're going to spend our time talking on this morning. It's this: your words matter. Your words have value. Your words change things. If I were to walk on the stage and say, "How's everyone doing? It's a great day. Good morning. Glad you're here," that changes the atmosphere of the room. But if I walk in, I go, "Man, I got some bad news to share with you guys," it changes the room. Words matter. Words are important. Words change things. With words, a marriage can be healed. With words, a war can be started. With words, two people say, "I do," and generations of families are started based on those two words. And I know there's a marriage license that you sign, but everyone doesn't show up and huddle around a marriage license to watch you sign it. They want to see you stand up there and say, "I do," because words matter, and words make a difference. I want to spend some time today just talking about why words matter and why they make a difference, why they're so valuable. You know, we live in a land of cheap words, and honestly, I don't think it's like this across our globe. I think this is something fairly unique to America. A few weeks ago, it was longer back actually, we talked about a guy by the name of Yusuf, and we haven't heard much about him because Saeed, who Jeremy mentioned earlier, was recently arrested, and he's kind of getting all the press as far as imprisoned missionaries go. But there's another man named Yusuf, and he was arrested. He was recently re-arrested, if you haven't heard that. He was out for a little while, but he's back behind bars again. And they threatened to kill him, and they imprisoned they took his wife and put her in prison. They took his kids and handed them off to Child Protective Services, whatever they call it in the country he's in. And so they gave his kids away. And this is the crazy part. Listen, this blows me away. In order for him to be completely exonerated and let go, to walk out the door into freedom, to walk out those doors after being beaten senseless over and over again, to go get his wife, to go get his kids, to now sleep in a bed at home with all his family under the same roof, to have his life back, he had to say 5 words out loud. Muhammad is the true prophet. If he were to say those 5 words, he was free to go. Now to us, that sounds ridiculous because we live in a land of cheap words, where we would just say whatever we would say. Whatever needs to be said to get what we want, we say it. Over there, they take words seriously. And all he had to do is say 5 words, and he walks out the door. And as of now, he's yet to say those 5 words. But we live in a land of cheap words. We live in a land of free pizza. But we all know it's not free. Anything that says free, we all know there's something hidden. We know there's small print. I love Pizza Hut. I eat there too often. And they have these slogans where it just says, "Any pizza, $10. Lie. Not any pizza, $10. Most pizzas, $10, but not any pizzas. You want stuffed crust? That's $12. And I want to go, well, that's a pizza? And it says any pizza. So I want that pizza for $10. We live in a land of cheap words where we say things we do not mean. And this filters into your life, and this filters into my life. We say things. We exaggerate things. We just toss out words like no big deal. We see stuff and we go, that's awesome. And inside we're going, that looks pretty good. But we say, that's awesome. Or you type LOL when you're not really laughing at all. Or because we all do this, right? Or how about this one? Because we're all guilty of this. We go, hey, let's get together sometime. Let's get together and have coffee or go out to lunch. But we either didn't mean it, but we probably didn't even mean it, but we won't pursue that. We're not actually going to make that. We just say it's our way of going, hey, you're pretty cool. Let's get together and have lunch. We live in a land of cheap words. And if we're not careful, that filters into us, and we begin to say things that we don't mean and spout things that aren't true. My goal for us today is at the end of this talk, two things. One is that we understand the value of words. We understand the value of encouragement. We understand the value of criticism when it's necessary. That we understand the value of words. But secondly, and maybe more importantly, that you and I would begin to slow down in what we say. And you know I'm a hypocrite for saying this because I talk quickly. But we would slow down and be careful about what comes out of our mouths. That we would treat words like weapons, and we need to be cautious how often we use them. I want to look at a passage in 1 Samuel, and it's actually just a setup, and so it's a lot of reading for a setup, but I believe it's worth the effort. So I need you to understand what's happening between a guy by the name of David and a guy by the name of Saul. And just to give you a brief overview in case you're new to Christianity or new to the Bible, and even for some of us, there's certain stories I still read and I go, where'd that come from? Never seen that. So these two characters, Saul was the first king of Israel, and he was not following the laws of God. So God's Spirit is taken away from him, and it rests on this kid named David. Now, David was famous. Most of us would at least know the story of David and Goliath. And so David has got some fame to his name, and people are looking out for David. And so David's pretty popular, but Saul's the king, and this bothers Saul. It bothers Saul because he wants the attention, and David's getting all the attention. It bothers Saul because it says in another place that he was aware of the fact that the Lord had left him and had now rested on David, and this bothered Saul. So Saul literally tries to take the life of David. We see in chapter 18, if you were to jump back a little bit, Saul says one time, because this is kind of a cat and mouse game that goes on between the king and the kid. And this is kind of a cat and mouse game. There's actually a place in chapter 18 where Saul says, I'm no longer going to raise my hand against David. In other words, it's done. I'm tired of fighting. But he doesn't hold true to his word. Look at chapter 24. After Saul returned from pursuing the Philistines, he was told David is in the desert of En-Gedi. So Saul took 3,000 chosen men from all Israel and set out to look for David and his men near the crags and of the wild goats. He came to the sheep pens along the way. A cave was there, and Saul went in to relieve himself. David and his men were in the cave. They were far back in the cave. And the men said, just look at me here for a second. So you're in the cave, you're hiding. He's traveling. The king is traveling with 3,000 men. He's out to kill you, all right? He's probably going to because he's got an army. You've got a few men. You're back in a cave, and in walks the king by himself to relieve himself. He's by himself. And all the men look around you. They go, this is it. This is your chance. Here's your chance to kill the king. I mean, he's been trying to kill you for so long. Let's kill him first. And so they begin to tell you these things. In fact, one of them even says, if you read it in there, he goes, the Lord has done this. The Lord has provided you this opportunity to murder the king. And David will have none of it because he believes strongly that it's not his place to usurp authority. If God has put him as king, David's cool with that. And so David sneaks up behind Saul, and he cuts off a piece of his robe, and he keeps it, and he backs up. The king leaves the cave. I'm just going to tell you the story. The king leaves the cave. David feels incredibly guilty because he has hurt the king. He's not hurting, but he did something against him. And it says that he fell down on his face and felt horrible for the fact that he had cut off a piece of clothing from the guy who is trying to assassinate him. That's a conscience that I don't have. It's amazing. Saul leaves. His men gather around him. They begin to walk away. Dave walks out, and he gets the attention of Saul. Saul, hold up. And so they have this conversation. So look again, if you have it. Let's look at verse 8. Then David went out of the cave and called out to Saul, "My lord the king." When Saul looked behind him, David bowed down and prostrated himself with his face to the ground. He said to Saul, "Why do you listen when men say David is bent on harming you?" Like, why do you listen to that? I'm not trying to hurt you. This day you have seen with your own eyes how the Lord delivered you into my hands in the cave. Some urged me to kill you, but I spared you. I said, I will not lift my hand against my master because he is the Lord's anointed. See my father, he calls him father. He was married to one of Saul's daughters. See my father, look at this piece of robe in your hand. I cut off the corner of your robe, but did not kill you. Now understand and recognize that I am not guilty of wrongdoing or rebellion. I have not wronged you, but you are hunting me down to take my life. May the Lord judge between you and me, and may the Lord avenge the wrongs you have done to me. But my hand will not touch you. As the old saying goes, from evildoers come evil deeds, so my hand will not touch you. Against whom has the king of Israel come out? Whom are you pursuing? A dead dog, David is saying about himself. A flea? May the Lord be our judge and decide between us. May he consider my cause and uphold it. May he vindicate me by delivering me from your hand. When David finished saying this, Saul asked, "Is that your voice, David, my son?" And he wept. "You are more righteous than I," he said. "You have treated me well, but I have treated you badly. You have just now told me of the good you did to me. The Lord delivered me into your hands, but you did not kill me. When a man finds his enemy, does he let him get away unharmed? May the Lord reward you. May the Lord reward you well for the way you treated me today. I know that you will surely be king, and that the kingdom of Israel will be established in your hands." Now listen, this is the part I want you to catch. That's all a setup for what we're about to read here. "Now swear to me by the Lord that you will not cut off my descendants or wipe out my name from my father's family." So David gave an oath to the guy who's been trying to kill him that he would not harm any of his family. Saul returned home. Now, jump over to 2 Samuel chapter 9. 2 Samuel chapter 9. I want to introduce a new character to you. A lot more reading, but again, I think it's worth it. So in between that passage and this passage, Saul dies. David didn't kill him. He went to battle. He lost. He's dead. David becomes the man. And so you see right here and again, David had given his word that he would not harm Saul's family, and he was true to that. Chapter 9, verse 1. David asked, now he's the boss, David's the guy. "Is there anyone still left of the house of Saul to whom I can show kindness for Jonathan's sake?" Jonathan was Saul's son and a good friend of David. But the point is here is he's saying, is there anyone left of this family of Saul? Because I've given my word. Is there anyone left? Now there was a servant of Saul's household named Ziba. They called him to appear before David, and the king said to him, "Are you Ziba, your servant?" He replied. The king asked, "Is there no one left of the house of Saul to whom I can show kindness?" Ziba used to work for Saul, and so David still respects this guy. He's still a servant to the king. Ziba answered the king, "There is still a son of Jonathan. He is crippled in both feet." "Where is he?" the king asked. Ziba answered, "He's at the house of Micah, son of Amiel in Lo-debar." So King David had him brought from Lo-debar, from the house of Micah, son of Amiel. When Mephibosheth, let's say that together. I'll say it, then you say it. Mephibosheth. Great. So when Mephibosheth, son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, came to David, he bowed down to pay him honor. David said, "Mephibosheth, your servant," he replied. "Don't be afraid," David said to him, "for I will surely show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan. I will restore to you all the land that belonged to your grandfather Saul." He's offering to give this guy, who the Bible calls lame or crippled, which you need to understand at the time it was different than it is now. If you were crippled, a lot of times you were left for dead. They didn't take the time to even bring you along because you had no value. You couldn't go to war. You couldn't work. Specifically, Mephibosheth, if you read some other places there, he wasn't born this way, but he was dropped when they were fleeing, and he broke. It doesn't say exactly what happened, but he was lame in both feet, so he was dropped. Now in comes to the king Mephibosheth, who is lame, bows in front of the king, and they have this conversation. Verse 7, "Don't be afraid," David said to him, "for I will surely show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan. I will restore to you all the land that belonged to your grandfather Saul, and you will always eat at my table." Mephibosheth bowed down and said, "What is your servant that you should notice a dead dog like me?" Then the king summoned Ziba, Saul's servant, and said to him, "I have given your master's grandson everything that belonged to Saul and his family. You and your sons and your servants are to farm the land for him and to bring in the crops, so that your master's grandson may be provided for. And Mephibosheth, grandson of your master, will always eat at my table." Then Ziba said to the king, "Your servant will do whatever my lord the king commands his servant to do." So Mephibosheth ate at David's table like one of the king's sons. There's a lot of analogies here. A lot of really good basic spiritual analogies. One is you and I are just like Mephibosheth. We are dead dogs. We are spiritually dead. We have nothing. We come and prostrate before ourselves before the king, and he picks us up and he says, "You are welcome to eat at my table." Spiritually, he's saying, you can be one of my sons. And so now, around this great table, where I believe they actually sat and ate, you have the king, and then one of the king's sons, who's a mighty warrior and who's valiantly slayed who knows how many people, and another son who's smarter than any of us. And you walk down through these sons of David, and then here's Mephibosheth, who is lame and crippled, and he is eating at the table of the king. But here's what I want you to really get about this. I mean, it's great that we get to sit at the table, and it's great that we are treated as sons. Those are great things. But here's the thing. Number one, if you're taking notes, the value of your word. The value of your word is based on who said it, not who heard it. The value of your word is based on who said it, not who heard it. I mean, if I'm one of David's advisors, I would have said the same thing those guys in the cave said. Let's kill him. Like, here's your chance. God has showed up. He's given you favor. Kill the king. But David wouldn't hear it. And then later, David makes a promise. He makes a promise to a guy who is trying to slaughter him. This makes no sense to me. And even after that person was dead, even after there was nobody there to hold him accountable for what he said, he still kept his word. It didn't matter who heard it. It mattered who said it. And David had a conscience, and he meant what he said. Number two, speak truth no matter the consequences. Speak truth no matter the consequences. There will be times in your life, and there have been in mine, where it is way easier to lie. There will be times in your life where it's way easier just to go with the flow and just say what everyone else is saying. Listen, words mean something. They are valuable. Do not waste them, and do not say things that we do not mean. I want to tell you a story. It's about a guy named Richard Rembrandt. Most of you guys have probably never heard of him. He started a ministry called Voice of the Martyrs. It works with the underground church and works with martyrs or people who are being persecuted across our globe. He died a while back, but it's still going strong. He was born in the early 1900s. In 1944, he lived in Romania. In 1944, the communists seized control of Romania. So his Christianity was being challenged. He was no longer free to do what he wanted to do. Still, though, he printed 1 million. Listen, in 1944, to print 1 million of anything was not an easy task. It would still be a challenge today, but then it was even a bigger deal. He printed 1 million Gospels of John, and this man would take them around and give them to Russian soldiers so they could hear the gospel. They could read the gospel in their own language. That was in 1944 when the communists came over and seized Romania. In 1945, this is going to blow your mind. In 1945, they called together what was called the Congress of the Cults. I'd never heard about that till this week when I was studying this. Over 4,000 priests, pastors, and ministers were brought together in one place. They were all assembled together. They had elected an honorary president for this Congress of the Cults, and his name was Joseph Stalin. No joke. He was their honorary president. One after another, people in these 4,000, these leaders, some of the bigger pastors of these bigger churches, they would stand up and they would go to the podium, and there being nationally broadcast over the radio, these men would say out loud that they thought that communism and Christianity could coexist. And man after man after man who called himself a Christian surrendered their loyalty not to Christ, but to communism. A young Christian woman could bear it no longer. She looked at her husband, a Lutheran pastor, Richard Rembrandt. She said this: "They are spitting on the face of Jesus. Go wash the shame off his face." Her husband looked at her and he said this. He said, "If I speak against the communists, you will no longer have a husband." The pastor's wife simply replied, "I do not wish to have a coward for a husband." Whew. So he stands up and he walks up to the podium, and in front of 4,000 traitors who have turned their back on Christ, he begins to talk about Jesus. And he says, "I cannot say that communism coexists with Christianity because they do not believe the same things. They do not believe in the Great Commission, and I refuse to bow down to the ways of communism." That went out nationally to everyone that was listening. One voice amongst many who stood up for Jesus. The next year he was arrested and beaten. His wife arrested and beaten. He spent 14 years total in prison. The story goes that eventually they had to force him out of the country. Not the bad people, not the communists, but he was released one time and they convinced him not to go back in. You can do so much for the underground church if you stay out and just let people know. And there's stories of him speaking in front of great men in free countries. And he would take off his shirt and he would show them the scars. They say that he'd always wear stuff that came up to the neck because from the neck down he was just covered in scars. But he began to talk about the underground church. Words matter. And there will be a time when all of us, it will just be easier to lie. It'll just be easier to go with the flow. And I'm challenging you in those moments, even if the whole world is not listening, even if it's just 4 or 5 people huddled around a cubicle and they're saying stuff that you know is wrong, your words matter and they make a difference. And when you say something out loud, it will change something in that room. Your words matter. Number 3, we'll be done. Your words either build trust or destroy it. Your words either build trust or destroy it. When I was in college, I had a good friend. He is the funniest guy I've ever known. His name was Chris. He lived in my quad. We were good friends. He was in my wedding, just a guy that I really loved. He was also the craziest guy. Most of the stuff he did, I'm not old enough to talk about, especially in front of our church, because you can imagine I was in college. But he pulled pranks and he did stuff that was crazy. I remember him putting hair remover in his roommate's shampoo. I remember one time he stole his girlfriend's swimsuit and he put it on and he came out like no big deal. And it was absolutely hilarious because he's walking around in a girl's swimsuit and he just came in and sat down like, "Hey, what's going on?" We're like, Chris, what do you do? Okay, so that's Chris. So you get the idea who Chris was. And he did other things that if we're just two of us and you're a guy, I'll tell you some really funny stories. Ladies, you'll never know, and it's probably good. So this is Chris. He's just a goofball. But Chris had something that most people would have never seen unless they lived with him, unless they were in the same quad. Chris was always a man of his word, always. If he said he was going to do something, he did it. It was the way he was raised. It didn't matter what the consequences were. If he said he was going to do it, he was going to do it. In fact, I remember specifically, this happened all the time, but one time it was a weekend, and all the quad guys happened to still be in town. And so we decided to go to a movie in Tulsa, which is about a 45-minute drive. And we were all going. We were excited to go, and Chris didn't want to go. And he was the life of the party. We wanted him with us everywhere we go. And I remember the guys going like, come on, Chris. And the problem was he had given his word to somebody that he would stay on campus in case something bad happened. I'm out of words. No, not security. If you fix things, maintenance. He worked maintenance. And so Chris just said, you know what, if anything goes wrong, I don't plan on going anywhere. I'll be here. Well, we all decided to go, right, Chris, let's go. Let's go. And they tried all the peer pressure you could imagine. They tried to get Chris to turn on his word. Oh, certain girls are going to be there. And Chris, I gave my word. And it's going to be, we're all going. Everyone choose going. I gave my word. I gave my word. I gave my word. Fast forward another year and a half. Chris, the craziest guy you will ever meet. You want another Chris story? One time, it was the resident director for the guy. It was his birthday. And they had a big birthday party in front of the whole school in the cafeteria. And they pushed a cake out, and Chris jumped out of it and sang happy birthday to Dave. And let's just say it was in the 90s where things aren't politically charged like they are now. And so if you follow that reasoning, and he sang happy birthday, and it was hilarious and awkward and funny. So this is Chris. A year and a half later, they give Chris a key, a master key to every single door on the campus of our school. And to anyone else from the outside looking in at Chris would have thought, that is the very last person on this campus that you would want to have access to every office and room. That is ludicrous. But you know what? The people he worked for, and a few of us that knew him well, saw something that no one else saw, that he was a man of his word, that when he said something, he meant it. No matter how crazy and goofy he got, no matter how many things that he did that were just nuts, he was a man of his word. Your words either build trust or they destroy trust, one or the other. Let me read one other passage of Scripture to you really quickly. This is Matthew 21. You don't have to look it up. I'll find it for us, and I'll read it for you. Matthew 21 says this. There was a man who had 2 sons. He went to his first and said, son, go and work today in the vineyard. I won't, he said. But later he changed his mind and he went. And the father went to the other son, said the same thing. He answered, I will. But he did not go. Which of the 2 did what the father wanted? The first, they answered. Jesus said to them, I tell you the truth, the tax collector and prostitutes are entering the kingdom of God ahead of you. For John came to show you the way of righteousness, and you did not believe him, but the tax collectors and the prostitutes did. Even after you saw this, you did not repent and believe him. I love this story because he's like, there's these 2 guys. One says, I'm not doing any work. The other one says, yeah, I'll do it. The one who says, I won't, actually did it. And the one who says, I'll do it, did nothing. Listen, words matter. If you say you're going to do something, do what you say you're going to do. And listen, this kind of goes back to our first point, but we'll wrap up with this. There have been times that I say things that I don't follow through on. I'd like to think I'm pretty good about keeping my word, but I can give you some examples. I remember once or twice when my kids were quite young, and I'd say, hey, after school, we'll go get some ice cream. And then after school, they have forgotten. I have not forgotten, but they have forgotten, right? And I'm busy. I don't have time to go get ice cream. So what do? I ignore it, and it goes away. That's wrong on a number of levels. goes back to the first point is, our word is our word because of who said it, not who heard it. So it doesn't matter if he heard it or not. It doesn't matter how old that person is. The fact is, I said it, and I'm going to live by it. And then also add it to this point, which is, listen, our words build trust. And if I keep doing that time after time, eventually my sons aren't going to trust me anymore. Words are powerful. They change things. We should take them serious. We should be men and women, listen, we should be men and women who speak intentionally, who encourage purposefully, and are slow to accuse and slow to criticize. We should mean what we say and follow through on our commitments. People should talk about us behind our backs because we are men and women who keep our words. This is what I'm challenging for us this week. I want you to understand the power of what you say, that it makes a difference. I'm just asking us to slow down. I'm talking to Dusty Tailor. To slow down and be purposeful in what we say. Words are valuable. As I finished my studies of words, and it wasn't just me, there's a number of us that helped put together these talks. But now I begin to see why confession works. I begin to see because these words that we say out loud change things. Maybe my words don't physically move objects, but in the spiritual world, they change things because words are powerful. Let's pray together.